Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach, and today I wanted to just speak generally about team structure. A couple of comments wanting to discuss how we should be setting our team up, obviously where we should be spending our coin, mid prices, etc. So I've got no notes in front of me, just going to be speaking sort of generally, so how long and where exactly it goes, we'll have to wait and see, but I just want to take a look at each position individually, a few philosophies, and just talk about how I'm structuring my side up in between the premiums, mid-prices and rookies, obviously. But look, as we well know, the best teams always go with the guns and rookies philosophy. You want to have as many guys in your starting side that you can bank on as possible. Clearly, we want to be starting, ideally, all our premiums start round one, and they're in our side in the final round. That'd be a perfect world. Doesn't always happen, but I certainly think we discuss a lot about nailing those rookies or who's going to be the breakout player, but sometimes it's just as simple as not butchering your premiums. You know, I look back at previous years of my selections, and some of the poorer choices are ones that I didn't think about much at all. You know, picking premiums like Hanbury last year or Trelaw, you know, sort of things like that. And I think sometimes we just see what they did last year and you go, bang, yep, he's in my side. And sometimes premiums can go wrong. You know, they don't always go 110 plus like we envision. So that's something that we shouldn't overlook. I think we do plenty of research and pick our brains on breakout contenders and rookies, but it can't be overlooked that if you tick every box in the premium category, well, you're going to be in the mix pretty early on, that's for sure. I want to take a look at the midfield first because I think it's the simplest. As you guys know, I do not like having mid prices in my midfield. Minor confession, I am looking at Cam Ellis-Yeoman. Very interesting. Just looking, he's not in my side, but at 260 odd, I really like him as a player, and I have for a while. And the reason he comes up in discussion for me, just quickly going off on a little tangent, is because I've lost a little bit of faith in Alan Christensen, which I might discuss on another video, but maybe didn't see enough midfield time. I didn't watch every quarter, but a little bit of concern. He's 267, so I thought, well, Cam Ellis-Yeoman, you know, it's not adding an extra mid-pricer, but it is perhaps breaking a slight rule, even though he's probably slightly more expensive than some of our top-end rookies. So just a little confession, but it's certainly not breaking that one just yet. He'd have to impress me in JLT too. But look, basically speaking and generally speaking, I feel the midfield is a spot and a position that we just put as much coin as we can. It's the biggest spending position, and so it should be. You get the most points from there, and the top scorers are always from there. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think we all know if we're looking at the top 20 scorers over the whole competition, a huge percentage of that is going to be midfielders. So clearly the most 100 averages, the most 110 plus averages, you know, off the top of my head, Doherty would have done it, and in the forward line, at least what we've got on offer this year, no one did it. So clearly the parameters in which we hope premiums produce are different in each position. Midfield, we're looking for 110 plus if we can. At the moment, I've got 5 premiums and then 3 rookies, and of course the bench is always going to be rookies, so I'll just focus on the starting position. But I do have at the moment 3 rookie players who are 180k plus. At the moment it's Dow, Davies Uniacke and Will Brodie. I watched Brodie with interest today against Geelong, see how he goes there. So it is tough to speak about rookies because inevitably sometimes we can discuss and forecast things and then they're not named round one, or they haven't been as good as we thought, or they're named emergency, and it can throw a spanner in the works. So I am hesitant to talk about rookies sometimes because it is a bit of guesswork until we really see those round one teams. We'll be able to lock more and more in as these JLT games go, but even now there's still a little bit of question marks over a lot of guys. So basically speaking, I'm rolling with the 5 premiums. Tempted to go a 6th, but just the way my side has been balanced and how that has all gone, it is 5. At one point I had Pendlebury, and as I discussed in my look at my side, the team update a couple of weeks back, I dropped him and it opened up a lot of coin for me to, I think I got Pierce Hanley and a couple other guys, sort of bolstered a few other positions and got a bit more depth. So I think 5 premiums in the midfield is a must. we've got to do that. And a sixth, I don't mind that as an option if you can afford to, if you're comfortable leaving some of the other areas a bit light on. And I can understand that philosophy because the most points are on offer, and therefore if we can get an extra midfield premium, granted you nail it, then that's going to be extremely good for us. So I think definitely 5 or 6, and if you don't go a 6th premium, some people will look at having their 6th being a O'Meara or a Griffin or an Armitage or maybe a Cam Ellis-Yeoman, and it's generally not something I would do, as I've discussed many a time, but if they bang the door down, it could be hard to say no, but I couldn't see myself going any of them 300 plus. I'd generally steer clear of anyone between the 300 and 450 mark in the midfield. I just think it's so difficult to have them be a successful selection in the sort of numbers they've got to average, and as I've said, there's big points to be gained in the midfield, so I think we should just go on the bankables, and ideally there's also some better rookies around the 180 to 210 mark that historically are very good. So I think that's where a lot of people will land, probably 5 and 3. Some will have that mid-pricer, but generally there's always going to be 5. You know, a couple of must-haves if you're just putting your side together. I definitely think Cripps is a must, and so many people are going to have 5 as well, just if you're looking to structure up your team. So that's the midfield. I think guns and rookies, the way to go. Bank on the guys that you know will deliver, pay the top dollar, and sit back and enjoy. The back line, I do find it interesting to talk about. I've had quite a few player profiles that are defenders in that potential premium bracket the last couple of weeks, so I'll discuss that second up. At the moment, my structure sees 4 premiums, 2 rookies. For the record, I only have the one mid-pricer in my side at the moment, and that's Alan Christensen. And sometimes the term premium mid-pricer can be up for debate as well. For example, I've got Christian Salem and Pierce Hanley in my backline at the moment. Some people would say, well, shorty, they're not a premium, mate. And I guess in my eyes, I'm selecting them to be premiums. Therefore, that's how I'll categorise them. But they are blokes who are premium candidates at the moment. They haven't shown consistently in the last few years that they are. But 4 and 2 for me, and the back line I feel offers us a license to take a risk, you know, have a bit more dare in that position, because I think our forward lines are going to have plenty of midfield guys who are dual position players but will play midfield. Our midfield, full of the jets of the competition. Our rucks, fairly straightforward generally speaking on most years. The back line, so much changes. There's the lowest scoring position on all 3. Tougher to pick. Sometimes you don't always get what you wanted for your money. So therefore, I am more inclined to not pay top dollar, but perhaps go for a bloke who I feel can step up. And that step is smaller than other positions. And that's another reason I like. I discussed this in the Salem podcast. 2 reasons I like taking a bit more of a punt in the back line. As I said, there's less reliable players, less guys you can bank on. Even look at Elliot Yeo. He's really expensive, widely regarded as going to be the top defender, maybe along with Hibberd. But even Yeo has his question marks. There are concerns about him. There isn't a Dustin Martin in our back line. That's just the way it is. There isn't too many players that we can just get in the side and absolutely be full of confidence that they will deliver. So therefore, that uncertainty allows more of an option to perhaps go for a guy around that 400 and 450 to take that next step. And as I said, that step is smaller. You know, if we're looking at what qualifies as a premium across each position, midfielders, we're looking for 110 plus. Forwards, I think we're looking for about 100. You know, I think we definitely want to be picking guys who are going 100 plus, because there's a few viable options who can do that. Our ruckman, 105 plus, generally, I feel. That's sort of what I'm looking at. And the back line, I think we're looking about 95. And certainly for your D4, D5, D6, depending on the strength of the season, you can sometimes be comfortable with a guy who's averaging 93. So I think you can get away with that. So therefore, if we take the Salem example, who averaged 79, if he's a forward, then we're probably looking for him to up his average by 21 points. So if he's a midfielder, we're looking at 31 points. But he's a defender, so I can be comfortable if he ups his points per game by 13 to 14. You know, I would accept that. If I pick him and he turns out to average 94, then I'm pleased with that. That's a good selection. He's not going to be the top defender, but I'm happy with it. He can be my side for the whole season and end up being D6. So I'm comfortable with that. So that's my rationale in terms of the back line. I think if there's a position that you're going to take a punt on, where you have a little bit less to lose, you know, that risk isn't going to burn you as much, and there is a bit more transition and different players rolling through that top 5 to 6 defenders year on year, then the back line's the spot to take that risk, I think, because there are a few guys that look to be getting more midfield time who have either been handed defensive status, dual position status. So it's a bit of a rolling door at times as to who are the main guys in our back line. So I am certainly more inclined to take a punt in the defensive unit for all those reasons I said, the uncertainty, and it's much easier to become a keeper as a defender. And I think in a perfect world, if we can start as many guys in our initial team that become keepers for the entirety of the season, or at least through the buys and beyond for the most part of the season, then we'll be sitting fairly pretty. We'll be doing well, because I think if you can convert a few candidates as premiums, you know, guys who are around that 400 mark in the back line, if you can convert them and pick them and they do become premiums, well, you've saved yourself maybe 100k and a trade. So as we know, trades are so valuable to get your side from a good team to a great team over the course of the early part of the season. So it is crucial to do that. So as I said, my midfield at the moment, 5 and 3. Backline 4 and 2. And I will say some people will err on the side of caution, and as I said, there's a little bit more uncertainty in the backline. Some people will just go 3 premiums, and that's fine. A lot of people will probably have Yo, Laird, Hibbard, because they're confident in those guys. They think they'll be the top 3 or 4, and then they'll roll out the rookies. Now, it's so tough to try and decide structure in terms of rookies, because the backline at the moment looks like there are a few handy rookies. You know, there's certainly a few out there. You know, you've got Doty, I think I said that right, I think I question it every time. Finnisley, I think I buggered that up as well, the young giant. Keefe, Murray, Mirror, there are a few guys that just come off the top of my head, sort of thinking. There seems to be a few more options than, say, the forward line, but, you know, ideally, you don't leave yourself too shallow in that rookie space, because something that I've fallen trapped to in the past is having the premiums covered off well. You know, that's fine, but just having my rookies with a bit of an exposed underbelly, I guess, having too many D6s or M8s or F6s scoring 40s and 50s, just not spending an extra 50k to maybe have a guy who's in his second year or going to get more opportunities. Sometimes I've been caught a little bare in terms of those lesser light rookies, and therefore you just get the odd 30 and a 50, and it can kill you. It can really kill you. I mean, ideally, if we can just get rookies who just bang out 70s, you know, 60, then an 82, then we're fine. That's all we need. It's just if you can make sure, and obviously we'll identify this closer to the season, because the round 1 teams they'll give us a definite answer on on how that's going to look. But clearly what we want to do is have as many guys that have a reasonable role in the side, have a decent option in terms of scoring. You know, they're not going to be players who, you know, a small forward or a real lockdown defender who they're going to get a game but they'll only score 30s or 40s. If we can nail some of those guys that are going to be consistent scorers, just solid scorers, play each week, whether we pay 123k or 193k, then I think it's important that our starting rookies are reliable to an extent. You know, we're not hoping they average 90, but I think if we can just avoid those players that average about 45 and can just kill you, that's super important. So that's, again, bit of a tangent, something else to think about, but that's sort of what I want this video to be, just general discussion and whatever comes to the head. So I do think while we're picking our sides, don't expose too many rookies that are a bit risky in terms of their job security and even scoring, which can be tough to pick, but we'll get a reasonable guide. And sometimes you can't pick the guy who averages 70 and the guy who averages 85, but you can definitely notice the guy who's going to average 70 and the one who's more likely to be about 50, just really not in a points friendly sort of position. So that's where I'm at with that. So midfield covered off, backline covered off. The rucks, pretty straightforward. Look, Gawn, he's going to be in there. He'll be in every side. Nick Nat, falling off the radar with the uncertainty on his fitness. Fair enough. Who else are we looking at? Cruiser's there. Ryder's there. Jacob's there. Stephen Martin's there. Brodie Grundy's there. Toddy Goldstein, some may even have a little bit of hope for as well. So I think it's pretty simple. As I said, we're looking for about a 105 average. I think Gawn will be in every side. So it's about how you go about that second ruck position. At the moment, I've got Grundy. I like what he's doing. Mason Cox, I feel, is going to play predominantly forward with Darcy Moore going back, and Collingwood need targets up there. Brodie Grundy thrives as a solo ruck. I think Cruz is a bit too expensive, and he's only done it for 1 year, and his body is extremely questionable. So there's got to be concerns about paying such a top dollar, but some people will. Otherwise, it's really up to you. You know, Stephen Martin was really impressive yesterday. And that's what he does. His follow-up work is great. He's fantastic. A lot of those guys you can mount really good cases for, and it'll just come down to what you like. I mean, some people will say, look, Shorty's going to share the ruck with Cox. You know, why are you picking Grundy? Pick this bloke. Jacobs doesn't have anyone to contend with. You know, and I'll come back with a counter-argument. So the ruck is quite individual. Gawn, going to be in all teams. There's probably a handful, maybe a couple more guys that really put their hand up in terms of the ruck, and I think that's pretty much where we got to go. Those handful or so of guys who are premiums. I don't think we should muck around too much with the rucks. The only time we should go with a mid-pricer is when you have a guy who's maybe returning from injury, going to be the solo ruck, and scoring is not a concern. And take Aaron Sandilands, for instance, last year, really served us well. Even someone like Jared Witts really served us well. You know, he was a solo ruck, shown signs at Collingwood that when he was a solo ruck, he could really perform. So I think you can sometimes get burnt with that mid-price ruck. I know I have in the past. I think of blokes like Leuenberger. Was Bell Chambers even an option a few years back, potentially? You can really get burnt. And the thing with ruckman is there's far less options, you know. There's generally not too many guys that you can sideways trade to get a bit of coin if a mid-price guy goes wrong. You pretty much always, if your mid-pricer doesn't go right, you've got to find 200k somewhere else to get up to those premiums. Meanwhile, you're getting shocking scores, and that's what scares me a bit. I just think it's far simpler to go with the set and forget ruck combination. Really do your research, be confident with who you think is going to be the top 2 or 3, lock them in. Because I think if a mid-pricer goes wrong in the ruck, then that's super concerning, particularly if it's a guy that you can't quite trust his body. I mean, we've seen that before. There won't be too many rookie options in the ruck for our R3, so a lot of the time, depending on a little bit of fortune, if one of your ruckmen goes down, you're probably looking at a 0. There's generally not too much coverage, so you're either copping a 0 or you're trading him. So if that happens and a bloke's at 320 and hasn't moved too much, well, that's just a real headache. It's a real wasted trade, and I think it's far easier to just go, bang, someone durable, someone reliable, get us your 105 average, and we'll be fine. We'll sleep happy, so that's all good. Moving on to the forward line, and the final one. At the moment, I've got 4 premiums, 1 mid-pricer, and the 1 rookie. So it is going to be an interesting one, the forward line. I think there's a lot of guys, as is always the case in our forward line, where they're down as forwards, but they're going to play midfield. I talk of the likes of Heaney. You've got Billings, Petrarca, Dalhouse potentially might as well. There's talk of Wingard doing it. Toby McLean ran through the midfield a fair bit the other day. All those types of players. Even Matheson, he's going to be a full-time midfielder at 400k. So where do we go about with the midfield? Is it too risky to go too many of those guys? Do we just bank on the reliables? You know, do we just go a Menengola? Do we just go a Buddy Franklin? You know, we've seen them do it. Let's just lock them in. Well, At the moment, I've gone with a bit of a next generation forward line and guys who I think are going to be top tier midfielders, hopefully this year, but certainly in the future. I've got Heaney, I've got Wingard, Billings is back into the side, I couldn't resist, and I've got Petrarca. I'm a big fan of Petrarca, as you know. So, and the other guy is Christensen, as I said earlier in the video, sort of umming and ahhing about where he may line up and whether it's worthwhile getting him, but certainly do have a lot of faith in him when he's on the park. So what will most people do? I think most will definitely have 3 starting forwards. The forward line is fairly difficult to lock in premiums. It is a little bit tricky because even, you look at Franklin. I know he was dominant the other day, but surely his fantasy days are numbered. Menegola, such a change to that Geelong midfield with Gaz coming in the side. Is he going to get those sort of numbers again? When you're looking at 2 of our top scoring forwards and they've got question marks over them, well, there's going to be a lot of questions from there on out, isn't there? So I think Heaney will be the lock. I think so many people have him and will have him. Don't worry that he didn't score well on the weekend. That's fine. He'll get there. He hasn't had a perfect pre-season, bit of a niggle and things like that, I think, with the knee, but you're going to need him. I would lock him in. He's locked into my side. And there will be quite a few of those types who are moving into the midfield. Like I said, your Wingards, your Billings and things like that. So I do really feel that there are some good options, enough good options to allow you to go to a 4th premium in the forward line. And at the moment, it seems as if the rookies in the forward line, there might not be a stack, or there's probably a few names that we hope impress and hope are named round 1. But at the moment, we probably don't have enough to bank on. So I think that's really interesting. Even sort of looking up to the 200k mark, there isn't a stack. I mean, Cam Rayner's in there. I suppose some people will be starting him, that's for sure. But just scrolling through, there isn't a stack of great names, or at least at the moment, that are shouting, I will play round 1, lock me into the side. So I think that's why at the moment a lot of people will go with probably the 4 premiums and a mid-pricer, or maybe 3 out-and-out premiums, 1 mid-pricer, and maybe a Petrarca type, or around that 400k, a bit more of a risk, like I was saying, with the defensive line. Basically because we probably don't want to expose too many forward rookies at this time. We're still a couple of weeks away, so it's hard to say with any real confidence who's going to play exactly, but the early forecast perhaps suggests that, maybe you don't want to expose too many rookie guys at this point in time. But I think that's the way to go in your forward line. If you can find guys who average 3 figures, who have played a bit of forward but are going to be midfielders, I think that's what we want. And there's enough options out there. I was watching Dalhouse the other day, playing a bit through the midfield. He might be tempting. I still think that Doggy's forward line is going to have so many players roll through it. If we can find a full-time midfielder, I think that's perfect. Even someone like a Toby Green who can play both, he's a beautiful link man, finds the ball easily in what's a tough position to find the ball. Sort of, you're not in the midfield, you're not deep forward. It can be tough, that sort of transition player. But Toby Green plays it really well, and he might be an option for a few guys too. But generally speaking, it's obvious you want to cram as many midfielders in that side as you can. So the forward line always presents quite a few tasty options. And again, we've got a few. A couple of guys like Wingard and Billings and Heaney haven't had perfect pre-seasons. They've had their niggles. But I personally think, looking at our forward line options, there's not enough absolutely grabbing me that I'm prepared to take that little bit of extra risk, because I hate the idea of getting to round 3. You've picked a guy who's a slightly underdone preparation. He's only averaging 86, and you're like, oh, Shorty, what are you doing, mate? You've picked him and you knew he didn't have a great pre-season. That's what I always fear. I always like to play guys who have had a good pre-season, so in my mind, there's no real reason that they shouldn't perform. I'd hate to get to round 3, they've started slow, and I go, oh, why they started slow? It's like, well, they didn't really have a great pre-season, did they, Shorty? That's pretty clear, mate. I'd hate to have that regret, but at the moment, the forward line isn't throwing enough confident and bankable options for me to feel confident in them. So I'm prepared to take that, minor risk with guys like Billings or Wingard, who will probably just play 1 JLT match. But again, sometimes you just never know. I remember the other year, Joel Selwood had a poor pre-season, barely played, came out the first month and was outstanding. So sometimes it's just tough to pick. You never quite know. We do know that pre-seasons correlate to great seasons, but it isn't a golden rule for absolutely everyone. Across the whole competition, of course, that's a pretty good rule of thumb, but there are exceptions, and I think if we can get one JLT 2 game into those guys, then that'll be enough for me. But speaking of enough for me, I've been talking for some time. About, what are we, probably pushing the half-hour mark. I threw an edit in there somewhere, so probably about a half-hour mark. But look, hopefully you've enjoyed what has been a lengthy video, but hopefully interesting. Hopefully you've just been able to sort of throw it on in the background and just more of a general topic of discussion video. Nothing too cemented into any sort of topic, but just looking across the whole ground, and hopefully it's just giving you something to think about. You know, probably haven't tackled anything super individual or exact, but hopefully it's just made you think about your side, maybe a couple of plan Bs, plan Cs in case you want to do this or do that. And yeah, hopefully it's giving you something to think about. But look, I'll be back for more JLT wrap-ups on the Monday evening, and I'll certainly have plenty more player profiles coming your way, but stay tuned for those. And again, thanks for subscribing, all those guys who have come on board recently, and the ones who have been on board since day dot. Do appreciate. So talk to you soon, guys. Cheers.